Hello, welcome to the tutorial on the monthly monitoring tool. As a support coordinator, it's your responsibility to ensure that the services provided to the individuals on your caseload are being delivered appropriately and that they continue to meet the goals and needs of the individuals receiving supports. One way to do this is through monthly monitoring. In this tutorial, we will be reviewing the process of monitoring services and completing the monitoring tool, or MMT. We will review how, when, and why the monitoring tool is completed, and we will also review each section of the monitoring tool and key questions to be asking during monitoring. Finally, we will review how to upload the monitoring tools into iRecord. The purpose of monthly monitoring is to ensure that services are being delivered according to the Individual Service Plan, or ISP, and that they continue to meet the goals, dreams, and needs of the individual. Monitoring helps to identify any barriers to services, assesses growth and progress towards goals, and ensures that services meet expectations for quality. Monitoring is more than just a form to complete or a checklist of yes/no questions to ask. It is an in-depth conversation that asks detailed questions about service provision, satisfaction with providers, progress towards goals, health and safety concerns, and many others. We will be reviewing all of the items on the monitoring tool throughout this presentation. The Division of Developmental Disabilities, or DDD, has set minimum standards for monitoring services. These standards must be followed by all support coordinators and support coordination agencies. Monitoring is done on a monthly basis for all individuals. For new assignments, monitoring begins the month after the initial service plan is approved. As per the DDD, monitoring must be done according to the following schedule: monthly phone or face-to-face contact. Email and text are not acceptable. Quarterly face-to-face visits. These may be done at provider sites, homes, or other community settings. If an individual is receiving services from a provider for at least 16 hours per week, you must conduct at least one visit at that provider site during the plan year. Finally, annual home visits are required at the residence where the individual lives, at minimum once per plan year. It's important to keep in mind that these are minimum standards required by the DDD. This is not to say that meeting the minimum standards is all that is required of you as a support coordinator. You will certainly be contacting individuals and providers as needs arise or things change. Contacts outside of the monitoring tool are documented in the individual's case notes in iRecord. So now let's review how monitoring is actually completed. First, it's important to review the previous month's monitoring, as well as any case notes that have occurred since the last monitoring tool. This will help you to know what's happening with the individual and what issues may need to be updated or discussed. It may be helpful to go back and review 1 or 2 months monitoring before making your monthly contacts. It's also important to seek input from a variety of sources. This will help to ensure that you are aware of what is happening in all areas of the individual's life. For example, if a person attends day program, lives in a group home, and works part-time, you'll want to alternate your monthly contacts among the providers, the individual themselves, or other people important in the person's life, such as a family member or guardian. Although you are only required to contact one source each month, you want to be sure that you are up to date in all areas. This may require additional monthly contacts or contacting more than one person for your monitoring tool. Finally, the information documented on the monitoring tool itself should contain only information obtained at the point of contact. All other contacts and information is documented in case notes. This slide lists all of the areas covered by the monitoring tool. We will review each area individually throughout this presentation. The first section of the monitoring tool is completing identifying information for the individual. This includes the individual's name, their DDD ID number, which is found on the tile in iRecord, the date of contact. This should be the date that the contact actually took place, not necessarily the date that it was uploaded to iRecord. The support coordinator who is completing the monitoring tool will be documented, as well as the support coordination agency. The individual's contact number is the phone number where the individual who was contacted for the monitoring can be reached. The name and relationship of the person providing information to the support coordinator. This documents the person that the support coordinator actually spoke to complete the monitoring. This could be the consumer themselves, a guardian, or a provider such as a day program or a residential provider. Again, be sure that you're alternating contacts each month. You will also identify the contact period, the contact method, and the contact location. These are drop-down menus where you can indicate whether it's a monthly, quarterly, or annual contact, whether it was done by phone or face-to-face, and the location that the monitoring took place. Finally, you will indicate the date of the approved plan and the reporting period, which would be the month and the year that you're conducting the monitoring. In the next section of the monitoring tool, you will be asked to document any outstanding issues from the last point of contact. These may include issues that are ongoing or things that have come up since the last monthly contact. Be sure to include a detailed description of the issue and any follow-up action that has occurred or still needs to occur. For example, if you have referred an individual for behavioral services but an intake has not yet been scheduled, what has been done to contact the provider or to ensure that follow-up will occur? For new and annual plans, this section should also detail goals that providers have developed to achieve plan outcomes. You will want to review these goals periodically to be sure that providers are delivering services consistent with plan outcomes. The Medicaid section of the monitoring tool will ask you to document whether or not Medicaid is active and if any action is required. This is extremely important as Medicaid is required to receive DDD funding and to maintain services. If Medicaid is terminated, providers, including the support coordination agency, will not be paid and services may cease. It is important to remind families that Medicaid must be reviewed annually. A redetermination letter will be sent to individuals, families, or representative payees a few months before Medicaid is set to expire. This will request documentation that eligibility is maintained and must be completed and returned in a timely manner. Also keep in mind that an individual's assets cannot exceed $2,000 for Medicaid eligibility. If assets are in excess of $2,000 for any month, they must be spent down. Be sure that individuals and families are aware of their Medicaid status and when renewal is due. If Medicaid is inactive, you must complete a Medicaid eligibility troubleshooting form, upload it to iRecord, and submit to the Medicaid Eligibility Help Desk. You will be able to see a person's Medicaid status and history by clicking on the file box on the individual's contact tile in iRecord. The litmus strip next to the individual's name will also indicate Medicaid status. If green, Medicaid is active. If yellow, action is required. And red means that Medicaid is inactive. Next, you will be asked to review the person's budget and to note if any actions or changes are needed. For example, an individual may want to add a service, but there is not sufficient budget to cover the costs. Review what action can be taken, such as possibly reducing or amending another service to make funds available. If there has been a significant change in the person's functioning or support needs, a New Jersey CAT reassessment may be needed, which may lead to a tier change and increase or decrease in the budget. You will also want to make note if an IDT meeting is necessary to review any changes. There are no issues and no additional services requested. Document that services have been discussed. Some individuals may be happy with services and not want anything more. However, people may not be aware of what other services can be offered. Review the budget with the individual or family and let them know if there is money available. Suggest things that may be of interest. Let them know how much is in their budget and how it can be allocated. If the person is happy with services and does not want anything else, document that this was discussed. Budget information is displayed on the plan tile in iRecord. Again, the litmus strip will tell you the budget status. Green is allocated, yellow is approaching the maximum availability, and red is fully allocated. The individual budget components and amounts available and allocated are also shown on this tile. The next section of the monitoring tool is where you will review all services and progress towards goals. This is one of the most important sections of the monitoring tool, since ensuring services are being delivered and meeting needs is the reason why we conduct regular monitoring. It's important to ask detailed questions about the services being provided, how they relate to the individual's goals and outcomes, and what strategies are being implemented to achieve stated outcomes. The service section of the monitoring tool covers service needs, service delivery, and progress towards goals. We will review each of these individually on the next slide. The first questions on the services area consist of drop-down menus where you're asked to indicate yes or no as to whether or not services meet assessed needs, are being delivered according to the service plan, and if progress is being made towards outcomes. However, it's not sufficient to simply check off the box and move on. Each outcome on the service plan should be reviewed and details in terms of the services and outcomes be described. Let's consider a case where an individual, John, has recently been exhibiting behavioral outbursts at home. In this case, you may want to note that the services in John's plan are not meeting his current needs, and a revision may be needed to add behavioral supports. You will also document if there are any barriers to service provision, such as a lack of transportation to get to a program, dissatisfaction with the service provider, lack of follow-through from the individual, or any other barriers. Describe what steps are needed to remove these barriers and ensure that quality services are delivered. For example, finding a transportation provider. Next, you will review the goals on the individual service plan and document progress towards meeting these goals. Again, be specific. Providers should have specific goals for the individual based on outcomes in the plan. Review these and determine whether progress is being made. For example, if John is receiving behavioral supports, ask about strategies implemented and their result. For example, John's behaviorist developed a reward chart that is being used at the group home. Group home staff note that negative behaviors of stomping his feet and banging the walls have decreased significantly in the past month since using this system. If progress is not being made, identify barriers and how they can be addressed. Discuss actions that may be needed to ensure that the outcomes and goals are still appropriate for the individual and how they can make progress towards these goals. This might be an ISP revision to add or change a service, or it might involve changing an outcome that is no longer relevant to the individual. The next area of the monitoring tool will ask about provider satisfaction. Ask if the individual is happy with services and providers. Indicate if there are any issues with either staff or others around them. For example, not getting along with another program participant. If problems are indicated, discuss how they can be addressed. You can also report any issues with providers, such as delays in scheduling meetings or in approving service delivery reports. You'll also want to note if there are any quality concerns that should be reported to the DDD or if an IDT meeting is needed to discuss a particular issue. The behaviors section of the monitoring tool covers any behavioral concerns, changes in behaviors, or trends that may require follow-up. When applicable, describe what the behaviors look like, when they occur, and how they are managed. For example, you might note that the individual has verbally aggressive behaviors, such as shouting "shut up" and name-calling when in large crowds or noisy places, and that this is managed by allowing the person to wear headphones in noisy environments. In cases where a specific behavioral incident has occurred within the reporting period, document who was involved, whether anyone was injured, if 911 was called, and any other pertinent details. Include information about follow-up with other agencies and whether an unusual incident report or UIR was filed. Community involvement is an important aspect of a fulfilling life, and community access and integration are primary goals of support coordination services. It is therefore important to ensure that individuals are able to access their community and be involved to the extent that they desire. Some individuals may be able to access the community independently as they choose, while others may rely on support. Ask detailed questions about how the individual is involved in the community, what activities they participate in or would like to participate in, and how the person is supported in accessing community activities and resources. When speaking with providers, ask about community activities that the individual has participated in during the reporting period. Indicate if there are any barriers to community involvement and how they are being addressed. For example, does an individual need someone to take them to a religious service, or is transportation needed to get someone to an activity of interest? Like community involvement, friendships and social interactions are significant parts of life, though not all individuals may be able to form these connections without support. As a support coordinator, it's therefore necessary to ensure that services and supports are being provided to enable people to have social interactions to the extent desired. Ask questions about the individual's friends and the people they enjoy being with. Is the person able to see friends and maintain social contacts? And if not, what can be done to make this happen? Perhaps the person needs help with finding opportunities to meet people with common interests, or maybe they need help with transportation to get to a friend's house on the weekends. Find out what the person likes to do and with whom they enjoy doing things. By knowing this, you will be better equipped to help people make connections and find supports if needed. The next part of the monitoring tool covers choice and decision making. Everyone has the right to make choices, regardless of guardianship, communication barriers, or other impediments. Ask about opportunities for the person to make choices and how the individual communicates preferences and desires. If the individual is nonverbal, indicate how they communicate preferences and participate in decision making. Note if there are any barriers, for example, the need for a communication device, and how they are being addressed. As you know, New Jersey is an employment-first state, and it is assumed that everyone who wants to work can do so. Employment choices and options should always be considered, even if the person is not ready for competitive employment right away. Ask questions about employment interests and discuss what supports are in place or needed to ensure that the individual is able to access employment opportunities and work towards employment goals. This may include referral to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, or DVRS, development of specific work skills or work-related social skills and work behaviors, volunteer opportunities, workplace accommodations, self-advocacy, and knowledge of rights, for example, the ADA, or supported employment and individual supports. The communication section of the monitoring tool is where you will note if any contact has taken place with team members during the reporting period. Both formal and informal contact should be noted, including meetings or phone calls. Indicate the reason for the contact, issues discussed by the team, and the outcome. This information should also be included in the individual's progress notes and iRecord. Another important responsibility you have as a support coordinator is to ensure that individuals receiving services have health needs met, are in safe environments, and that they are protected from abuse and neglect. Ask about any medical appointments that have occurred during the reporting period, and note any doctor visits or emergency appointments, hospitalizations, or health concerns. If there are any changes or concerns, be sure to describe the issue and any follow-up action taken or still needed. For example, a referral to a specialist. Note if medical or health issues require a change to the service plan, such as physical therapy, a technology evaluation, or a change in service provider. During visits, be sure to observe the individual and his or her surroundings for any signs of abuse or neglect. Look for things such as poor hygiene, nervousness or avoidance of particular people, lack of household privacy, and how providers and others in the surroundings speak to and address the individual. Any suspicion of abuse or neglect must be reported immediately and an unusual incident report filed. The next section of the monitoring tool deals with incident reporting. If an incident has occurred, an unusual incident report will be filed describing the incident, who was involved, and any follow-up taken or necessary. Incidents can fall under the categories of abuse, neglect, exploitation, Daniel's Law, or other. Reports should include a description of the incident, the date and place it occurred, who was involved, any injuries sustained, and who reported the incident. Most times, the provider will be completing the UIR and notifying the support coordinator with a phone call. The support coordinator will also receive a detailed copy of the URI from the DDD UIR reporting unit. All UIRs must be documented in the individual's progress notes under the UIR heading. If you become aware of an incident, send an email to the Risk Management Unit and inform them of the incident to be sure it was reported. In cases where the support coordinator is filing the incident report, follow the procedures outlined in the Guide to Unusual Incident Reporting for support coordinators and upload all documents to iRecord. At the end of each monitoring tool, you'll be asked to write a narrative summary describing the contact and any issues discussed. Summarize the monitoring contact by indicating who the support coordinator talked to, the highlights of information gathered, and overall impressions of how the individual is doing. Address any outstanding issues and how they are being addressed. Ask questions about outcomes and goals, and note progress or barriers. Include information about activities, community outings, or other things the individual may have done during the reporting period. Be sure that the person is up to date with all medical appointments and that there are no specific concerns in terms of health or well-being. Include any needs, issues, or concerns that have not already been addressed elsewhere on the monitoring tool, and describe any actions or next step that the support coordinator will take. Finally, if a quarterly face-to-face visit or annual home visit has occurred for the reporting period, you will summarize the contact in the related area on the monitoring tool. Remember, face-to-face visits must be conducted at least quarterly, and there must be at least one home visit within the plan year. During visits, the support coordinator must meet directly with the individual. It is not sufficient to meet with the family or providers without the individual present. Be sure you are taking the time to engage the individual, even if that means simply spending time with the person while they're eating lunch or completing an activity. Observe the surroundings, have good situational awareness, and be respectful of the individual's home and family customs. Make note of where you met the person, what they were doing when you arrived, how they interact with staff, family, or peers, and observations of appearance and demeanor. Summarize your general impressions of how the person is doing or their own self-reports. Be aware that the individual may not want to disclose information in the presence of others. You should therefore take time to talk to the person privately if necessary. If the individual is unable to provide information, it is important to visit with them and make observations. Note their demeanor, whether they seem comfortable in their surroundings, how they interact with staff and peers, and whether or not they are engaged in program activities. Also be sure to look for signs of abuse or neglect, such as bruises or physical signs, poor hygiene, withdrawal or fearfulness, cleanliness or safety issues in the environment, poor or disrespectful treatment by staff, or any other indicators that appropriate care is not being provided. Note if any issues or trends are ongoing, such as poor program attendance, and discuss any follow-up needed. Once you have completed your monitoring tool, you will upload it to iRecord under the corresponding icon for phone, face-to-face, or home visit. Note the date the contact took place, upload the document, and copy and paste your summary into the Notes section. Also be sure that you save your monitoring tools in the individuals folder on the Spectrum server. This concludes the training module on the monthly monitoring tool. Further information and a tutorial can be found in the Spectrum folder under the Supports SC Documents folder, SC Documents, Monitoring Tool, Tutorial, and Work Instructions.